F45. Here it is, old school. This is the way I got it from the train show. So, missing drive shafts, missing U-joint and drive shaft. Motors, basically, the mounts rotted out. A little bit of rust, but we've got the type of truck. Interesting, there's two different types of trucks here. Got the modern worm cover. This one has got the plate up here. This one has got it down here at an angle. So they're two different eras a little bit, but they still have metal side frames. Fortunately, they have the single piece instead of the piece that goes around the truck. Rough shape. Rough shape. The pair of them cost me like 10 bucks. So what are we going to do? I don't know, but it's an F45, so there's a ton of room inside the shell. Shells right now, I got them in the bucket, stripping off the paint. I don't want to put them in the ultrasonic because I just changed the fluid, and I want to clean these parts in there. And basically what I do is after the fluid gets a little bit dirtier, then I strip paint in it. And right now it's clean, so I'm going to use it for cleaning parts. It gets dirty, I probably strip paint in it, and then I get rid of it when it gets to be too full of paint. So, this is going to be another one of those where I'm going to do a bunch of stuff off camera. Since we've got plenty of detail videos, I'm going to go ahead and disassemble everything. I'm going to get it all cleaned up. Then we're going to get to work on these trucks, because these trucks are the notorious trucks for derailments. So we're going to improve those a little bit. Then we're going to work on some new electrical connection, and then we're going to put a new motor in. What motor are we going to use? Don't know yet. We'll go through our motor bucket and see if we can find something special for this. All the parts are out of the cleaner now. So let's take a look at what we got. Okay, first, there's the gears. Worm gears, nice and clean. I used Mean Green, which comes in gallon jugs. I get it at Menards. It's like Simple Green. I find it to be more effective in the ultrasonic than Simple Green. Okay, these right here, thrust washers. Make sure you don't lose these. They go on here, the end of the shaft. There's one in here too. And then the phosphor bronze bearings. All the gears nice and clean. When I opened this up, I found that the wheel sets, they looked to me at first like they're dirtier than I've ever seen any wheels. When I opened up the gearboxes, they were pretty clean. There was a bunch of hardened grease that had collected down here. I don't really know what that was, because the gears themselves were dry, completely dry. The worms were completely dry. And the wheels, what at first I thought was dirt. Now, the wheels have all been cleaned. We'll look at those here. The wheels were actually, they had corrosion. And I've never seen corrosion quite like I saw. Every wheel set on these had this corrosion on it. Something had gotten onto those wheels that caused a reaction. It was not good. They're all clean now, but I still haven't figured out exactly what it was that would have caused that. Despite the fact that these are definitely more than 40 years old. They are pre-1981s. Okay. Look at wheels again in a second here. Frames. Now I have coated the frames with some Rust-Oleum dark brown camouflage. I like to use that for the build that I'm going to be doing here. I'm going to be using a red. Like most of mine, they're going to be red. They're going to be that Midway red. I don't like to make them black because then they don't match quite as well, because the red I'm using is a very warm color and this brown is also a warm color. It makes them match better. So the side frames also, which they were supposed to be silver, but they also had some corrosion on them. So they are going to be this camouflage brown. They'll get detailed a little bit. They'll get some, they won't, I'm not just going to leave them like this. I'm going to do some detail work on those. Now, I also put the frames into the milling machine, and I milled my section out here flat. So I've got a nice flat trough here to fit my motor cradle in. Now, what about you? Here is an FP45 frame. They're slightly longer, as you can see, just a little bit longer. Most of you don't have access to a milling machine to do this. What do you do with this? If you can't mill it, fill it. Fill this in, put some styrene in here, and level it off. That's all you got to do. What if you really did need or want to mill it? Well, finding access to a milling machine may be a little bit difficult, but it can be done. Places that, the first place I would go to find out where I could find someone who has one, and it might cost a few bucks to have them do this, but shouldn't be too much, because this is like 60 seconds or less. Places that I would go first to check, I'd go to the auto parts store and I'd ask the guy at the auto parts counter who has a milling machine that could make this for me. They're going to know about machine shops that you can't just go on the internet and find a machine shop. Usually those places, the milling machines they have are fully automated. They're not going to just throw it into a vise and do that. Small gunsmiths, sometimes they have milling machines. And if you do a little looking around, ask the auto parts guy. He might know. Also ask the small engine repair guys. They also might know. Some of them will have a machine themselves, because they're not that uncommon. But otherwise, fill this. Make a flat surface here. Don't worry about covering up the holes. We're not reusing those. If you are reusing the motor, then leave it alone. It's good the way it is. Then I went ahead, as you can see here, I needed to match coupler height. So once again, I put it in the milling machine, and with this is the plastic version of the KD coupler height gauge. What I want is, when it's sitting on some trucks, I want it to slide right over the top. That's how I know I'm going to be able to mount my draft gear. I drilled this hole with a 1/16 drill bit. Comes in every small set of drill bits. Then I tapped it using a 256 tap, so I'd have threads for 256 screw. If you don't have a tap, get one. Where did I get mine? I got mine from the Hot Wheels Redline shop. And then you can order taps. I got a little box full of taps that I got from eBay. Now I can mount couplers, and they'll be exactly the right height, and they're body mounted. I like body mounted because they're stronger. Much, much stronger. Okay, wheels. Wheels have to be gauged. So first what I do is I clean them. In this case, I clean the corrosion off first. Then I put them into See if we focus on that. Okay, then I put them in the ultrasonic, clean them again. So all the grease and everything's gone. Then I used some graphite paint. I got a quart of graphite from a farm store one time. That will last me a lifetime. I put a little bit in a tester's jar. I just painted the end. Then I went and I polished these little axle nubs here. I took the graphite off. Polished the wheels again on the Harbor Freight. The 3-inch grinder has a polishing wheel, which is perfect for this. Polished it again. Then I took my ox guard. On a paintbrush, and I painted the nubs, the tire tread, and I put a little bit on the back. Even though we don't need the back, I didn't want any corrosion spreading. Didn't want any oxidation to occur. When I gauged them, anyone that was found out of gauge got a drop of tacky glue. And then they got gauged and set. Some of them have a little bit of split axle. When you put the glue in, you force it out, it'll come out through the crack, and so far that has not failed me. That has worked and kept everything together. Some people super glue them. The thing is, pressing those two wheels in there, you're trying to compress some air in there, and that's a no-go. And that causes them to crack. They're just too dang tight. And so a little tacky glue, get in that crack. It's just PVA. But PVA has strength enough for this purpose. Okay, back to the trucks. Now, I went ahead and I filed flat all this. Speaking of filing, these coupler pads, if you have a big mill file, you can file these down. You need to take them down to where there's an edge. There is, see how thick this one is? We can get a focus on that. Okay, see how thick it is? You take down this, you file this down till it's almost paper thin, but not completely gone, and that'll give you a match. Now trucks, I went ahead, I filed all these, not quite flat, but pretty close, and then I reamed out this middle one just a little tiny bit. It's going to give me a little back and forth play, a little extra. And once I cleaned all the bronze dust out of them, I then gave them a little wipe of ox guard. I also ox guarded the inside of these clips here because they tend to rust. Next, on these, when they are sitting inside here, as you can see over there, there's a spot that is free and clear. It's right, there's a spot that's free and clear. It's right here on this particular one. And I have run the wire backwards. I'm going to do a little bit of overkill on these this time. I'm using green and yellow because I'm running out of black and red. That's why I'm using green and yellow. If I had more black and red, I'd be using black and red. But let's see if we can match this guy up. Okay, so the green is the black wire. Yellow is the red wire. I went overkill on this wiring here, simply so that I'd have a way to show you how I want to wire this. So I made a little PC board, and I've just been snipping pieces off of it. I used some goop, glued them onto the top of these. Now, if you remember right, when the locomotive is pointed to the right, this flat thing here is facing to you. That way you know the trucks are in the right position, because they do have front and back trucks. I glued the PC board on top here, tinned it with some solder. Then I soldered the yellow wire underneath ran it around to the top. Yes, that is total overkill. We don't need to do that, but I'm doing it for demonstration purposes. Now I've got this is essentially the red wire. It is on this side, this little collector here. When these trucks are put together, the electricity is all collected to this one spot, so there aren't a bunch of wires everywhere. It makes it nice and clean. Then I'll put the green wire, attach that one right to its side, attach it to the black wire side, and then I'll have a collector. Collects power from the truck. The truck will be a self-standing, it's a standalone unit. It won't have wires running from it everywhere. Now it'd be nice. I like soldering on to this right here on both sides. That skips the rivet that holds this in place. For this time, I'm not going to do that. But that is, soldering to this part is difficult. And you use acid paste and you use some high heat. Sometimes I use the big, you've seen in other videos where I use the big soldering gun, the 250 watt, and I just touch and go and make a little spot where I can solder to. Then I can come back with the pencil, put the wire on there, melt the solder, and we're in good shape. But for this one, I'm doing it just like this. Now shaft is going to run between these two wires. One of them, no problem, it's underneath. It'll run on the other side of this one. That's how we're going to wire those together. We'll have collectors. Whoops. So that is where we're at. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reassemble the trucks in the usual way. I'm going to use the Mag 1 grease. This is your first time I'm going to be using Mag 1. Red lithium. Make sure that I get just a dab in each hole that goes onto so just a tiny dab of grease when the gears are in their positions. Maybe just a tiny bit of grease in here. Then I just wipe just a little bit on each gear. Just one wipe on just part of the axle. Install them. They'll be good to go. The Mag 1 spreads the way it should, and it does not get out of it. It does not spread from the gear anywhere else unless you use too much. If you did, it'll collect somewhere, but it will stay there. And it never gets hard. As we've proven over decades, it doesn't get hard. And it doesn't get all over everything. It stays right where it is and does the job it's supposed to do. And that is where we are at. Alright, so let's move on and do some reassembly, then I'll show you what. Let's review proper gear greasing technique once again. Alright, as you can see here, I have one installed. So, look at your gears. If you see a mark on them, that means that's the top side. So, first I take just a dab on my screwdriver here, and I put just a tiny bit in there. That's more than enough. And then the mark goes up. Oh, well, we can't do that yet because we forgot. We're going to grease the teeth. Now, since gears in this arrangement, they're not meant to really push on each other that much. Not like the worm gear, which works by pushing on gear teeth. These teeth barely touch each other. So we are only going to we're going to fill in not even a quarter turn here. Just like that. And nowhere else. We're not going all the way around. We're just going to put that in. Okay. Same with this one. There's the mark. Loop from the underside, just a tiny bit. And then we're going to hit just a little bit of these teeth, not too much. Just like that. We're got them in. Okay. Now they're in there. So let's go ahead and just rotate them around. and you'll start to see the grease will go. You'll see a little strand forming. That means the grease is going where it's supposed to go. It's working itself in. Now it's totally lubed properly. That is how you do that. Then when you put the wheels in, same thing on the wheels. Take a tiny bit and just put it, as you're holding it, in a couple teeth, like 3 or 4, just like that. No more. That's all you need. And that is more than enough. And that is a perfectly lubed wheel set. That's how you do that. Worm gear. Now, worm gear, we do 2 things on this. One, we get the grease. Don't go off the ends, because we need to put an oil there. Okay, I'm going to just pack it into these teeth just on one part. That is more than enough. Okay, but what we have to do, we're going to use some of our marble, which happens to be air tool oil. As I've explained many times, this is the preferred stuff. No sewing machine oil, no Teflon, no mineral oil, this stuff. It has a preservative. Do not use the mystery oil, because the mystery oil is a detergent cleaner. That stuff, that is meant to be changed every once in a while. This stuff is meant to preserve. That's why you use it in your air tools. Okay, so we put a dot on this shaft, just a tiny dot. Then we get in between the thrust washer and the bronze bearing, get a little dot there, and just a dot. That'll work itself in, and it won't spread. We didn't put enough to spread it everywhere. Now let's put our thrust washer on, if we can, and our bronze bearing. Okay, there we go. That is a properly lubed worm. That is how you should do it. This stuff, as far as I can tell, it lasts so far forever. And that is my go-to stuff. These 2. And they don't interact with each other. Mag 1 and marble. I don't use anything else. Okay, now I'm ready to reassemble the trucks. Okay, we've got motor installed. Printed a little 3D mount here. 3D printed a little motor mount here, little cradle. And I wanted the motor shaft and the drive shaft and the universal joints to be basically level across. So I made a mount, a little cradle, to do that. Now, if you filled yours in, then you don't need one this thick. Okay, then identify the front end by the light bracket. So what we have is, here's our right rail, the light color. Here's our left rail, the green. We're going to go from these collectors onto this middle circuit board. I've cut a gap right here, and the motor is wired to this pad on this side. When I collect all the power right here, if I bridge this gap, it will then work in DC. If I want to add a decoder, all I do is open the gap, decoder to the motor, decoder to the power. That's how easy it is. So I want to collect all power here. Nothing to here except my little bridging pieces. And then later, put a decoder in, we'll be good to go. The motor I chose is this super powerful FF180. Unfortunately, they aren't made right now. So don't ask me where you can get them, because you can't. Fortunately, I have a stockpile of them. So I'm going to be using them up, and until I figure out what motor I'm going to use next. Extremely powerful, very smooth, naturally with eliminated flywheels, because they just literally serve no purpose when you have a motor like this. In fact, they just get in the way. No reason to use flywheels with this kind of motor. Couplers installed, and the glue is setting up now, so we're ready to connect our wires. I'm going to use, instead of using tape like I've been using, got a little piece of heat shrink. I'm going to collect the wires through the heat shrink on both sides. That way they stay out of the way of the drive shafts. Now remember, when I started this, drive shafts are completely missing. So I 3D printed some shafts. Also, when using a motor like this, most modern motors have a 2mm shaft on them. So I had to make some U-joints for that. And then I was able to recycle the drive shaft connector joint. So far, it's looking pretty good. And so unlike my usual videos where I go through everything step by step, this is kind of a quick and dirty overview of the process of doing an Athearn Blue Box rebuild. So if you don't understand some of the things, making the circuit boards, the wiring, look at some of my older videos that are usually in many parts, where I go through each one of these things in depth. Alright, let's get this thing wired up and give it a try. Alright, that's it. We got them ready. We're not going to worry about shells yet. The shells still got to get all their paint stripped off, but mechanisms are working. So let's take a look. Right now I'm at 15%, maybe. There's that 2 volts, or almost 3 volts, both of them. Heading into the 18-inch. No problem. Excellent slow speed. My controller is not accurate enough to control the slowness that I can achieve with these. They turned out nice. So let's have a close-up here. Alright. Now, no, I don't care for these wires like this. And the only reason I did this is for demonstration purposes, and because this is an F unit. I didn't have to fit them in here tight. Because this is an F unit, and there's got a ton of space under there, I'm probably going to do some more stuff under here. For now, this works great. Okay, here's that capacitor that comes on these motors. People are like, oh, just get rid of it. Oh, you don't need it. Well, I have heard, everyone says, but no one has tested it. I'm going to test it on my oscilloscope, and we're going to find out exactly what does this thing do. I know what y'all say it does. We're going to find out exactly what it does. A lot of people think they know, but we're going to make sure. We're going to find out exactly, and then we will know for real what does it actually do. Now, I have a pretty good idea. I'm just going to get rid of it. But until I've tested it, it's just going to stay there so I can test it. I had to loosen up these drive shafts a bit by I put a little grease on the end of them. As I found out, the safety feature of this, of using these 3D printed parts with this motor, worked out perfect. was testing it, of course, at full speed, and it got to a place where it couldn't go, and the coupling flew off, just like it should. No stall. That was great. So then I told me I needed to loosen these up, and I did, and I've had no trouble since. But otherwise, these F45s are going to be excellent. And yeah, it's a shame you can't get these motors anywhere right now. And hopefully they don't go the way of my previous most favorite motor. Or hopefully something new and really exciting comes out soon. Can't be too far away. Somebody needs dual shafts somewhere. What are they used for? They are generally used in European automobiles as rear view mirror motors. Various adjusting controls. But there it is. The Blue Box F45 total rebuild. And that is a wrap.